to today's Ascender webinar, where we're going to be talking about the hidden cost of doing nothing. So today is a very special, exciting webinar because we've got two really great thought leaders in the HCM and payroll space. So I won't be talking for too much, but I'll introduce the lovely host today. We've got Tim, who's got a whole bunch of experience with implementing, helping companies implement HCM software, as well as Kelly, who is the General Manager of People and Culture here at Ascender, that she's had 15 years in HR leadership and being on boards, and we're so excited to have Kelly as a special guest here. So how are you this morning, both of you?
Yeah, good, thanks, Michelle. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Welcome.
So today we've got, so the webinar is all about the hidden cost of doing nothing. And so throughout the webinar, we've got a poll, as well as any time, please ask questions in the Q&A window or in the chat window. And we actually have a Q&A at the end. So if you ask your questions now to Tim and Kelly, we'll be able to ask them those questions at the end of the webinar and they'll be able to answer them. But enough from me, I'm going to hand it over to Tim to begin the webinar.
Great, thanks, Michelle, and thank you everybody for attending today. Hopefully, so you've all got your agendas and things you're going to achieve out of this, and we can cover a lot of this off. And as Michelle mentioned, if questions pop up along the way, please do let us know. Between us, myself and Kelly have quite a bit of experience. I've been working with HR technology and systems for the best part of 10 years, and Kelly is obviously the General Manager of People and Culture at Ascender, which is quite a large company in itself, and comes to us with a number of years of experience in leadership in HR, which is great. So let's just move along, and sorry, as I just make sure that I get control of my PowerPoint here. There we are, today's agenda. So what we're going to go through today is, I guess, the context. So what does it mean people are your most valuable asset? And a few important statistics and the like around this. How can we be more effective when it comes to hiring in a cost sense, and how to stop losing money from poor management, along with investing for future growth. And then, of course, my favourite, which is everybody's favourite, is case studies, because when we're putting together business cases and examples, nothing beats a good case study, which we've got plenty of experience with, and I've worked with a number of organisations on over the past. So let's move into it, and let's focus here on people are our most valuable asset, and that's a quote from every CEO ever, which we can attest to. I think our CEO would attest to that as well. But I guess what's concerning is that the statistics tell us a different story. One of the top ones there that you'll see, 80 to 90% of HR requests for funding get deferred or declined. And only 20% of HR of Australian companies actually have an integrated HR technology, which gives them a competitive advantage. And I guess, Kelly, we're in a fortunate position working for a HR company, or for a company that develops HR software and payroll software, that we have our own software that we can use. How valuable, I guess, have you found that, and having that advantage when we talk there about only 20% of Australian companies having this sort of technology in place?
Look, Tim, we found it incredibly valuable. If we look briefly at the history of Ascender, our CFO usually refers to Ascender as a 20-year-old startup. So we're only 20 years young, but our growth has come about largely through acquisition. And as you can imagine, the more companies that join the Ascender group, the challenge becomes, how do we ensure that we've got consistency in our data and the way that we view our people? How do we glean insights from that information, which then feeds our HR strategy and the programs that we have in place? So working with the PeopleStream system, module by module, we've been able to implement, starting with learning management, or the learning system, e-recruitment, and most recently the performance management system. So we found it incredibly valuable just to get that consistency of insight so that we can start to analyse data and have that feed our strategy and our programs, as I mentioned.
Yeah, fantastic. And I guess one of the key point there of 80 to 90% of HR requests for funding getting deferred or declined, having worked in a sales capacity with HR software, as I said, for the best part of 10 years, we always talk about our biggest competitor, and it's not necessarily other vendors, it's not other systems in the market, it's do nothing. And a lot of that comes down to this particular figure, that we struggle to get that funding, and we struggle to really put a good case forward. And that's because, I guess, when we're looking at the competition, if it is do nothing, we don't understand how expensive it can be to do nothing, which is what this whole session is really focused on today. So let's sort of sit here and say, where do you sit on the HR maturity scale as an organisation? Level 1, which is a manual HCM process. Level 2, automated point solutions. So we have a few different solutions, maybe one for e-recruitment, one for learning, one for performance, or a couple here and there. Level 3, which is the integrated HR suite, data flows that work through each module seamlessly. So you've got one particular system where we've got performance, learning, e-recruitment, onboarding, all in one sort of space. Level 4 is when we can then start to leverage that data across the suite to make business decisions. All right, so we have these systems in place, but not only are we running these systems, we're actually using the data that we get from these systems to shape the way we move forward. And I'll go on talk a bit about that later when we're talking about case studies. And then that leads up to level 5, longitudinal trend data for workforce planning and feeding back into HCM processes. I guess, Kelly, having worked in HR as a practitioner for a number of years, your ideal scenario, where would you say you're sitting at the moment? Where would you like to get to? How do you like to use data? Have you worked in manual? When was the last time you worked with a manual HCM process? How have you found the change between the different levels?
Yeah, so I think we're sort of on the embryonic stage, and we're definitely developing our level of maturity in that HR systems space. I think what's really important is, reporting through and being accountable to the CEO and also the board. We need to be confident that simple data like headcount, for example, is accurate, turnover data is accurate, and all of the data, no matter what it is that we are reporting on, has that data integrity in place. So I think starting at that very sort of immature embryonic stage is where we began, and we are slowly growing and developing in our maturity and being able to present data and analyse data from exit interviews, etc., and being able to use those insights, as I mentioned, in order to drive our strategies and our programs. So we're evolving.
Right. With that, Michelle, I believe you've got a survey that you wanted to run at this stage, just to get an idea from our audience on where everybody's sitting.
Yeah, so everyone, I'm going to open up the poll, and having heard Tim explain each of the levels, we run this poll quite frequently during our webinars, and so I'm just going to launch it right now. And we want to know, like, where do you sit on the HCM maturity scale? So are you still on level 1? You're going up to level 2? Just to give some context on some other times we've done this, very little do we find people are on level 4 and level 5. So it'll be really interesting to see what this audience is on. So you've got about a minute to fill out the poll. So we've got 30 seconds left. I can see half of you have voted, so make sure to get in and put your vote in, and then I can actually share the answers with everybody on the call today. So we've got about 10 seconds left. Get your vote in. I can see the responses. If you haven't gotten your vote in, please do. Okay, I'm going to close the poll in 5 seconds. So this is very interesting. So I'm going to close the poll now. Thank you everybody who voted. So I'm just going to share the results with everybody. So we've got 46% still on level 1, manual HCM processes, 29% on level 2, 21% on level 3, and we've got 4% on level 4, but nobody is on level 5. So Tim, what do you think about those results? Were you surprised or?
No, I mean, we actually stated there, that about 80% of businesses are still running quite manual and don't actually really have much, that don't have an integrated suite or an automated solution. So it doesn't surprise me to see that there's still a number of manual processes in place. And, day to day, my job is to talk with companies about how they're doing things and find solutions. And most of them are working off a manual base. So given that most people I talk to are in that particular space, no, it doesn't surprise me at all. So it's a shame, given how much technology is available, that we're still got so many businesses in that manual process or in that manual space, but not surprising at all. All right, cool. Let's move along and I guess talk about, we mentioned there about the different costs associated with doing nothing, but let's look at hiring for starters and as an example for building business cases. So we talk here at Ascender HCM with our HCM product around the economics of human capital management. And what a lot of people don't really, I guess, factor in is the costs associated with hiring new staff. This is something that gets overlooked a lot because we've got our day-to-day costs for running staff and having staff, but what we don't really factor in is how much time do people spend in the business before they get to that optimal level. So what we're talking about there is the cost to hire. How much is it costing to hire people? And I'm talking about advertising for a role, internal resources required to do interviewing, to do onboarding. Then those negative costs where we're bringing people, if there's recruitment agencies, I should say, when we're bringing people into onboard, we're paying a salary to somebody who's not coming in at a fully optimal level, right? At what stage do these employees actually start paying back the investment that we've put in to hire, train, and develop them? Now, with that in mind, 22% of all staff turnovers occur in the first 45 days of employment. If your level of optimization is, say, 3 months, conservatively, that's before we get them up to that level, and you're losing people at 45 days, you're losing them at that halfway point before they've actually started to pay back their investment, okay? So these early attrition costs are very, very expensive, okay? And I guess heavily overlooked at that time. Now, I know with onboarding, Kelly, I tend to get your insights into this. This figure here is pretty startling with regards to turnover. I guess, what have you seen in your experience? What have we got in place to make sure that this isn't an issue? Obviously, we have the benefit of having our recruitment and onboarding systems in place in order to help reduce this risk, but to also get this level of optimization up to speed far quicker. How much attention have you put into this particular area? And of course, you've got the benefit of having people like me around to sit there and tell you about all of this.
Yeah, look, we are putting greater focus, on this area. We're making sure that the employee experience at all points in that employee life cycle is a positive one. And to be perfectly honest, this onboarding piece in particular was an area where we got some constructive feedback about how we could be doing a lot better in that space. And that was everything from training and development, through to feeling part of the team. And it's a particular challenge at the moment because we are all working virtually and remotely. So we've spent a lot of time putting some structure, trying to understand what that and define and map that experience, for people that join Ascender. Because the last thing we want is to invest an awful lot of time and energy, not to mention costs. I think the tangible costs are easy to define. It's those intangible or indirect costs that we're trying to manage here. We don't want to keep expending all of our energy in that space to find out that that person hasn't been the right fit for us, or they have been the right fit, which is worse, they have been the right fit, but our onboarding process has been so poor that they've ended up leaving. So yeah, that's definitely a big focus, for our organisation.
And this has been critical now more than ever. I'm based in Melbourne. So obviously we are still not allowed in the office. I've got a number of colleagues who are relatively new to the business in the last 6 months who I've never met face to face, but their onboarding has been all online. So the need to get that really right and nail that properly has been critical in the last 6 months in particular, especially when, you know, with everything going on in the world. So let's move on to that onboarding piece there. As I try to make PowerPoint play nicely. There we go. Now, how do we work out the value there? We've talked there about, you know, the cost to onboard someone, the cost to bring someone in, the cost to onboard them. Now, if you've got attrition happening at a set particular date, that's money that you're never going to recover for training and developing staff. We then have the cost of onboarding, and there's a couple of simple calculations we can do. Now, we actually have a calculator on our website, on the standard website, so I know Michelle can share that around afterwards, but do get on there and have a look at it if you do are interested to sort of calculate this cost. But just as a simple, I guess, example, if the total number of hires onboarded is 750 and it takes 8 hours to onboard a new hire, and I'm talking there about getting paperwork, getting documents, getting all the information and getting it into your payroll system. There's a lot of different things, the back and forth, chasing after documents, and if things aren't done completely. And then we're paying someone an average of about $35 an hour to do this work. This could result in a yearly cost of $126,000 just on the labour part. This is not to mention all the other the other costs. So the other costs that can come in here is around printing. If you're printing documents and posting documents, posting documents. The other thing around, if people are coming in on day one and they're still completing information while they're on the clock, then we're paying people to do work. And we talked there about getting people to that optimal level. If they spent their first day doing paperwork and induction stuff that they could have done online before they did it on day one, there's another cost to the business. Now, let's say an onboarding system costs $18,000 to implement. It's a massive return on investment to the business. So I encourage you to jump on there and have a look at that calculator. So when we say the cost of doing nothing, these are the examples that we use. All right, how can we decrease hiring costs? So a couple of things which are really important. The first one is map out your existing recruitment and onboarding process to identify gaps. There's a great quote, I wish I had it up here, and I wish I could quote it off the top of my head around Bill Gates, which Bill Gates said. And it was basically around, if you apply technology to a bad process, it is only going to increase the trouble that you have with that particular process. The technology is not going to fix it, but if you find the gaps and identify any issues in your onboarding process and make it nice and clean and then apply technology to it, it's going to enhance the experience. So that goes to those first few steps there. And then the important one on the end there is to use feedback for continual process improvement. So Kelly, you mentioned before that we ran a survey on this and got a lot of feedback. How useful have you found that in changing and tweaking processes as you go?
Oh, you know, incredibly useful. So the survey that I was referring to was in fact our staff engagement survey. We run a pulse survey each year, and consistently some feedback came out about the onboarding process, the new hire training, in an area that we considered our core capability, which is our payroll space. And so it was critical that to improve the positive experience of our staff and to lead to greater levels of engagement and therefore retain our staff, we needed to improve that process. So we were able to mobilise our learning and development team. They partnered with one of our business units. Together with the leaders, they reviewed what that journey looked like. So that was one discrete part of the overall onboarding journey, and were able to redesign the training and that part of the journey so that employees had a much more positive experience. So now the next step for us is to introduce a survey after the onboarding has taken place to continue to get feedback at a time point that is much closer to the event rather than just through our annual survey. So we'll have various touch points throughout the year where we can continue to check and glean feedback on that particular process.
Fantastic. This is an example of how your onboarding journey can look. And we've grabbed this straight from our screenshot straight from our onboarding system. But yeah, as you can imagine there, and as you can see there, things like putting in online forms to be completed so that we've got no manual duplication, induction policies, compliance, all of this sort of thing can be put in here into the onboarding experience to have people running and ready to go by day one. And the important one there is visibility of what is expected, what's completed and what's required. So if you're sending out an email with a whole lot of forms or putting together an envelope with a whole lot of forms, it can be quite messy. But this sort of process with an onboarding system just makes it a really simple step-by-step process with very clear instructions and what to do on day one, where to go on day one, who to contact if I need anything. And then there's a number of other things that can be built into onboarding systems. You know, where do I get a good copy around here? Who am I going to be working with? What's my team? So that's the onboarding. Let's move on to performance management. And performance management, there's a part there about driving costs down when it comes to onboarding and the cost of doing nothing for that. And then there's the performance management element. Now, performance management has a number of hidden costs. And we use here again a number of different calculators. So consider a company with 500 employees and total payroll of $40 million. Research will show, and we've got the stats and data and a number of different outlets for this research, 66% of staff are well aligned and effectively engaged. But that leaves a third of staff who are either misaligned or unengaged, right? Which means that you're paying essentially 13.6 million in salaries to people who are not aligned, not engaged, not working at their full productivity. And this is something that gets overlooked and probably not the full level of appreciation. The biggest expense to many companies or most companies is our staff. So if our biggest expense is not running at its optimal level, we are bleeding money, we're losing money. Okay? And Kelly, just keen to get your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, look, again, during our engagement survey feedback, one thing that we've performed very strongly on is our staff understanding the direction of the organisation, which is fantastic. But the other part that we wanted to look at in more detail was having clarity for individuals around what their expectations were, what our expectations were of them, but more importantly, how we can recognise when they achieve their goals and celebrate those achievements. And I think it's that element, that the emotional side of engagement, that really helps drive staff engagement and individuals wanting to offer more effort and do things for the organisation over and above what the expectations are.
Fantastic. So, and you're right there around that emotional versus practical side of things there. What we're looking at is how can you improve performance management. This is a SEEK survey result that came out showing low engagement and quality factors. Quality of management, lack of feedback and stress levels were the three highest rated there. So if we go through this, I'm just going to click through these one by one and bring them all up. I love my PowerPoint animations there. But as you can see there, performance management, quality of management is your number one factor with regards to low engagement, right down to people I work with. A number of these can be helped and solved with technology and with platforms in place to help lift this engagement. So as we mentioned before, if a third of your staff aren't engaged, we are wasting a lot of money. And we have the potential through different things. And we've actually highlighted there factors with our own system where we drive this engagement up. So quality of management is a performance management piece. Lack of feedback or appreciation. And as Kelly just mentioned there, a good performance management platform has the ability to help us give this feedback. Same with stress levels. You know, that checkpoint, those touch points with your employees, those regular check-ins. And then career development, which can also, I think, come down to performance management, but also talent management and learning. Okay? And then access to training as well, of course, through talent and learning. So there's a lot of factors here in your top, I guess, your top reasons for a lack of engagement. A lot of these can be counteracted by a good platform or putting in a good technology in place. Okay, Kelly, I know you love your surveys and how to start with engagement. So you've spoken quite a bit here about how you run that engagement survey and how to interpret the results. I guess you're using the data to make decisions on what products can help. We have the benefit, obviously, of being a HCM system, a HCM product. So we can sort of roll out what we like when we want. But have you found that this data and this information that you're getting is shaping which modules you sort of pick and take, and which direction you want to head in?
Yeah, sure. So look, I started at Ascender 2 years ago, and we ran a pulse engagement survey at that point in time. And a lot of the noise, that I was hearing from our staff was, oh, why are we filling out this survey? We've done these before. Nothing ever happens with the results. It's pointless. And I made a commitment to our people that I would be the custodian of the survey, the results, and the action plan. And we have a CEO who very much believes that staff engagement drives customer satisfaction and leads to growth. And having his support obviously is critical to helping drive that greater levels of engagement. But we think about engagement in 2 ways, right? The rational engagement, which is all about engaging minds. So questions relating to, I understand the direction in which the company is headed. I have clarity of what is expected of me. I understand how I fit into the organisation. They are all rational in the way that we can engage our staff. But the most powerful way to engage staff is obviously on the emotional side. So that's engaging hearts. And that's ensuring that staff feel valued, and obviously our performance management system helps enable that. Staff need to feel like they're being inspired to give their best, and that they have that deeper link to the overall company purpose. That's really important. And it's the engagement, the emotional engagement aspects that drive staff retention, the intent to stay, as well as driving that additional discretionary effort. That's 4 times more powerful than the rational engagement. So when we get the results, we actually do look at which results and which questions relate to the rational element, the minds, and then more importantly, how do we engage the hearts? Because if we're going to increase our levels of staff engagement and therefore retention, we need to move the needle and focus our energies on that emotional piece. So we've started with an annual survey, but we're looking at our HCM tool to introduce surveys, as I mentioned, at various points in that life cycle. After onboarding, prior to exit, ad hoc surveys along the way. So we're constantly checking in, engaging where our staff are at any one point in time, and we can therefore quickly adapt the programs that we have in place or address any urgent issues as they arise.
Right. The other point there, and I guess where we move to next, is around boosting engagement with performance management process as well. And this is a few examples of saying what we do with our own platform. I've got the benefit of not only being an employee with Ascender, but also a manager. So I've been looking at this from both sides of the scale with regards to how we use this performance management. So it's funny, the second point there, set face-to-face planning at the beginning of the year. So where we actually sit down at the start of the year and go through this process of setting plans, setting quality objectives. So when we say quality objectives, we're talking there about SMART goals, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. Setting a development plan for how the employee can develop and grow as they move forward. Setting competencies, so areas that we want to grow, areas that relate to their particular role, and regular catch-ups with one-on-ones. And I think that's quite important as well, something that we spoke about before, not only from a checking in and continuous development point of view, but also from a well-being, see how people are going, because there's a number of other factors there that we may miss not having those regular check-ins. And the other thing which is really important, and I know Kelly as head of HR, this is something very important for you as well, document and evidence to substantiate the review, so there's no surprises for employees. Yeah. Anything there in particular that stands out as probably more important, or anything that I guess you like to focus on more than anything?
I think it's that regular discussion that's important, and acknowledging and celebrating. As I mentioned previously, that's how employees feel valued. We know that, and that's the emotional engagement. When they feel like they're being recognised, their achievements are being acknowledged, they're being rewarded, you know, for those achievements, then obviously that's a positive. All the rest is a process, a framework really that enables those discussions to happen.
Fantastic. So I appreciate we're running a bit tight on time at the moment, but you know, I will bring up an example here of what a one-on-one would look like with performance management technology. And you know, we work within our performance management system, obviously, to set very clear goals. As I said, SMART goals. We have a tool called BQTQ, which actually helps us write SMART goals as well. But being very clear, this is our objective. This is what it means to exceed, meet, or not meet. And then a high frequency review where you can actually set a status and actually see where people are rating month to month. I like to show this screen because a lot of performance management at the moment is it's really a performance appraisal. We get to the end of 6 months or 12 months and we're then doing an appraisal. You know, how did you go and what can we do better next time? I call it the woulda, coulda, shoulda method because it misses that opportunity throughout the year to actually drive continuous improvement, because we're coming to the end of the 6 month and sort of doing a complete evaluation. So the advantage of a one-on-one, as you can see there, is that we do that throughout the year and keep track of that throughout the year. I don't know, Kelly, if there's anything you wanted to add on that particular note there?
No, nothing further to add, Tim.
No, good. Tell I push that one and I sell that a bit. Anyway. So next steps, and this is something again where I work with organisations on a daily basis. My team works with organisations on a daily basis, and these are things that we push quite vigorously. Do your research, right? Where do you need to focus on within your business? Is that going out, getting the data? Is that doing surveys within the organisation? We've given you a few examples there of where costs are driven. The organisations where I have the greatest success getting a system in place are the ones that can come out there and tell me this is our turnover, and this is how much time we're spending hiring people, and this is how much it's costing us. Now, when I work with companies, if they can't tell me that straight off the bat, I'll actually tell them this is what you need to understand, because too often I'll speak to organisations and I'll say, right, what's in it? Why are we going to go and get this system? Why do you need it? And I say, I'm working 50 hours a week. I want to cut that back to, I want to cut 5-10 hours out of my week by making this a more streamlined process. I say, okay, so you're going to go to your CEO and say, give me this money. It's going to save me 5 hours of work time a week. Are you going to take a pay cut? No. So we're not selling it in the right way. We need a way to be able to get the data and identify what we're trying to fix, have a clear strategy, and then in the last point there, get your seat at the table. So be able to sit down with the executives, sit down with your board, and be able to clearly articulate, this is the strategy we want to implement, this is what we're trying to fix, this is the data to support what we're going to do. This is why this is why the system is going to save us money. This is how much it's going to continue to cost us if we do nothing. Okay. We have a bit of Q&A coming up as well if you have any questions that sort of focus on any one area in particular around this. So we've sort of gone through this already in a bit of depth, but you know, the business pain, what are we trying to fix? And be very specific about what we're trying to fix. Again, don't sit there and we don't want to use examples of save my time. We want to use specific cases Our recent survey, for example, said, we've got low engagement here. We believe that we can drive productivity to this particular level, so we're talking about business impact here, by putting in a performance management system. This is the time frame that we expect for the system to make this happen. Everything that we put in place needs a goal and an end date, because otherwise, if we don't have an end date, we're working to try, and it's fair and benefit as well. If you put in a performance management system to try and fix a problem, but don't have a time frame or goals set clearly, it's going to be harder and harder to achieve because we aren't working to a met goal. Right? And the big thing there as well, business impact if we do nothing. So I've worked with organisations where staff turnover is at 30 or 40%. We've calculated the massive cost of the business. We're sitting there working out, this is costing us $3 or $4 million a year to go out and hire and retrain staff. If we can cut that figure by 10%, it's going to save us this many $100,000. If we do not do that, this will continue to cost the company in the vicinity of $500,000 to $600,000 a year, for instance. We need to cut this back. So be very clear and articulate. A couple of other points here. For examples of financial drivers. Sorry, I'm working on a small screen now as I go over here. Financial drivers. Function, outcome, financial outcomes. And I guess we've sort of spoken before about how things flow. These are a few examples that we can work to. So I'm going to use the top one there. The middle one there, improved productivity. The function of improved productivity. The function is improved productivity. The outcome is increased output and productivity. What's the financial outcome? More revenue, output, decreased salary costs. So we talk about issues, evidence, and impact when we build business cases with our prospects, with companies that are looking to implement a software. The issue in this case is that productivity is low. The evidence is around the surveys or we've got high turnover. And the financial outcome of that is it's costing us money, or we're not driving productivity, we're missing opportunities. Okay. Case studies, I mentioned before, I love case studies. Nothing beats a good fact. I think on our website we've got about 40 case studies that our marketing team's put together, so Michelle, you'd be right across those. A couple of my favourite ones, Mercedes-Benz. Saw a 2% increase in performance management. I always like to raise that because if you can get a German car manufacturer to drive increase in productivity, you're doing a pretty good job. So 2% increase in performance management in under 18 months, and the system paid for itself quite comfortably. And that's what we talk about, having a goal on what we want to achieve, but also having a time frame on when we're going to do it so that we can realise that return on investment. Okay. And of course, November there, people go from giving you 70 to 80% to giving you 120%. They've seen a fantastic lift in productivity as a result. I really like the Mercedes-Benz one. We've got a few examples of that though, where they can actually measure the gain in productivity that they've had and measure that return on investment. With that in mind, Michelle, I guess we can throw over to questions from the audience.
Yeah, so we do have a few questions. So if you do have any questions, ask them now to Kelly and Tim. But it's just funny, I think we've got one of our customers on the line going, P.S. I love this platform. So thank you. Thank you to that comment. That's really lovely. So one of the first questions we have is, how do you actually get your managers to actually have those frequent one-on-ones? Because the feedback is they're too busy or they don't have time. So how can we actually get our managers to do those one-on-ones?
Well, I do them because, as I said, I sell the system, so I know the full benefits of it. One thing which I will point out quickly before I hand over to Kelly, because Kelly actually has first-hand experience with this. When we work with organisations, and this should be across any software in particular that you're looking at, we have a really big focus on change management. Performance management in particular, as an example, we actually run what we call a manager workshop. So when we implement a performance management system, we'll take a series of managers, with a number of managers within the business, and run a 4-hour training session on what's in it for them so that they understand. And I guess the problem that we have with performance management is that it's a mindset amongst managers that it's a hindrance as opposed to a help. It's time wasted. It's time that I've got to go and do this. It's a tick and flick exercise. Now, if we have that that mindset with regards to putting in a performance management system, that's how it's going to work. That's people aren't going to want to do it. But if people understand why it's there and how it's going to make their life easier, and there are a number of ways performance management systems will do that, they will engage far better with it. So that's a really key critical piece of when we implement a system. You know, we've seen those case studies there. As a manager of a team, I have the ability here to use this properly. It is going to make me look better. What's in it for me? It's going to make my life easier. It's going to make me look better. It's going to make me better at my job. So that's something that we really push hard. Kelly, I can hear your thoughts on that.
No, I absolutely agree, Tim, and that's exactly, as you say, the way that we've approached it here at Ascender. So we see the technology as the enabler, but anytime we have implemented one of the modules, we have done that in the context of coaching our leaders on performance and development or recruitment and selection. And I think when you do that, they then start to buy into the why that's really important, and that makes that behaviour change easier. So I think that putting that compelling reason out there is important. I find it fascinating, right, is that you step into a people leader role, and the one thing that you put to the bottom of your priority list is actually the people management side of it. You know, as a leader, you are responsible for financials, for people. You know, your role becomes more general in its nature, and you become less of an individual contributor, less of a technical expert. Yet, you know, we sacrifice our attention and our focus on those sorts of things. And you've already put compelling reasons as to why you would do it, right? The turnover, the losing of staff, and the cost of that. So I think they're all very compelling.
Yep, absolutely. Right. Anything else, Michelle?
Yeah, so I had a question. So how long does it take to get something like a performance management system implemented?
Yeah, so look, with our particular performance management system, which typically would say anywhere from sort of 8 to 10 weeks. It really depends on how engaged you are in the process. You know, the performance management system we have isn't a simple plug and play, turn it on, away you go sort of system. It's very tailored and configured to the specific needs of an organisation, along with the training to make sure that you get the most out of it. I generally find that with these, you know, switch on, tick and flick sort of performance management systems, you're buying a cheap system to turn it on quickly, but you just don't get the engagement because it's not tailored or built for your specific needs. The training, the change management isn't there. So those points we talked there about before about managers not being engaged and not using it properly, that's a massive issue. So with our system, a big part of it is about making sure that it's tailored to the business and that you're going to get the results you need. Otherwise, what's the point in investing is what I sort of say.
Awesome. And we probably have time for one more question, but thank you for all your questions. I'll talk a little bit about what's going to happen after the webinar, but the last question is, you know, how often should you really be running an engagement survey?
I'll leave that to Kelly.
Yeah, look, we do our full survey once a year, and then we do a pulse at the half-year mark, and that was particularly important for us this year given the COVID situation, but we also run ad hoc surveys. So, you know, we have offices here in Australia and then across Asia, and we wanted to get some feedback very quickly, for example, on how many people would be interested where certain countries permitted for staff to return back to work on a voluntary basis. And we were able to just push out a half a dozen questions and get a very quick gauge on you know, where certain offices were able to be opened, respective of all of the COVID safe restrictions, you know, whether people would be interested and what would their concerns be, and what is it that they look forward to when they come back into the office. And so we got a very quick snapshot of, you know, the pulse, how people were feeling, and could then open our offices accordingly.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Kelly, for running this webinar.
Pleasure.
After the webinar, everyone, we do have a survey, so please let us know what you thought, any feedback on what topics you would like to hear in the future. So that just gives us a bit of understanding what you want to hear, what problems you want to fix when it comes to your HR process. And also, I've linked the calculators in the chat. If you wanted to click on those links, it'll take you directly to the calculators, which you can fill out yourself, put your own employee numbers and all that. It's catered to you to do that for yourself. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Kelly. Any last words before we go?
No, just feel free to reach out if we can help with anything around building business cases.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, everybody, so much. And we hope to see you in the next webinar. See you all later.
Thanks very much. Yes.